Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Gary Thomas. Gary, please say hi, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, I am Gary Thomas. I'm a producer, director, and choreographer for live shows and events. Currently living in Los Angeles, but I have produced stuff in New York, Las Vegas, Shanghai, Tokyo, oh, and Jersey, Atlantic City.
Very cool. Very cool. You see any secret drones in Jersey when you were there?
No, no, it's been a while since I've been out there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, very cool. So for everyone that's watching, basically the idea of Comedians in Elevators podcast is to compare and contrast the idea of the comedian, which I'll define as a funny person telling any jokes, versus the comic, who is any person telling funny jokes. So it's two sides of the same coin. All right, first question, role of persona in comedy. So, how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self? What say you, Gary?
What do you mean, like making up their own voice or just like
Yeah,
talking in their
exactly. Exactly,
I think
right?
it
So
I
they
think
have,
it I think it depends on what their shtick is. Do you know what I mean? Some
uh-huh.
people are funnier because they're just coming from themselves and telling their own outlandish stories or whatever. And some people have developed a certain type of character. And there's a woman out right now. I don't know her name. She has red hair and always puts on a blue dress and talks like it's the 1940s. And I wish I could think of her name, but she
Well,
does
that
this
used
whole
to be Lucille Ball, but
yeah.
now,
Well, now it's whoever this woman is,
okay,
um but this works for her. She's got this whole uppity upper class like character voice and then her most of her routine is talking directly to the audience. You know, what do you do? What's your name? Where are you from? But she turns it into
okay.
some really funny stuff. But the
Uh,
whole voice thing works for her, you know.
is she older?
She looks probably maybe 30s,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
mid
So,
30s. Yeah.
okay.
She pops up on TikTok every now and then. I mean, I guess I should look at her name
Yeah, no, no,
too.
that definitely is going to fit in with more of the more of what we're going to discuss, but that would be basically crowd work, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying she's doing mostly?
Yeah, yeah, but she does it in a full character with this long dress, and it's a whole vibe that she comes out with. So yeah,
That's the best way to do it. So it's a give and take. It's not just about the audience, but she actually participates as a equal, member, basically the
yeah,
audience herself.
yeah.
Very cool. So would you say that authenticity matters, or is the illusion part of the magic?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, you have to believe in what you're saying to a certain extent, right?
For
You have
sure.
to
I
think,
mean,
yeah,
delusion can be illusion, right?
yeah, you have to think your material's funny on a certain level, or you can't sell it to people. Um, I think if you're going to do a character type thing like what we were just talking about, you have to commit to that 100%. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You can't
Right.
come in and out of a funny voice. You can't be part of a character for a little bit and then change it. You've either got to run with that or just come out as yourself.
Yeah, I see that quite often. That makes it difficult because usually you want to be a character, but sometimes the new material doesn't fit, and so you kind of right. So you got to like switch back to just telling jokes, and sometimes that could be awkward. So
Oh
I would
yeah.
agree 100% on that one. All right, punching up versus punching down. Where does the comic versus comedian stand on this? So is the audience member's agreement with a comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Well, I believe in punching up. You should bring the audience up to where you're at. I don't believe in punching down.
Okay.
Um, I don't know.
So
Be
you're
a little
saying
more specific for me.
yeah, I mean, when I think of punching up, the to me what comes to mind is the example of eat the rich, right?
Uh,
Even if you are rich, you could still just make fun of the rich. So, but
yeah.
that doesn't make everybody else rich, or does it?
No.
Do we do we
Yeah.
somehow start to feel that way? That'd be I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I think that might work. I'm going to try that. Punching up to feel rich. That's what we're all going to try as a group today. Is punching up to feel rich.
Well, I
Yeah.
think if you're already wealthy and the comedian's making fun of you, you're kind of in on the joke and you don't care. But if you're not wealthy, then maybe you're just happy that the comedian's making fun of the wealthy people. And so
Sure.
you're kind of getting off on that end of the joke. Does that make sense?
It does 100%. I mean, I don't see it that often. We see punching down quite often. Well, we have in the past at least. So
Well,
the
what did
punching
give
up,
me an
not as
example of what you consider punching down?
Punching down, well, I mean, people, a lot of comedians get criticized for it. So it's more the reaction to what a lot of people call punching down. So Dave Chappelle is a great example. He does a lot of transgender jokes or did a set, about that. And so he was criticized for it. And he also, but it seems like he did it on purpose. So, that was his whole goal, right? And he's doubled down on that, doing, another thing, other shows based off of that idea of
Well,
punching
I think
down.
social media has changed all of that as well because so many people are looking, you want more followers, you want more likes, you want a trend. So I think sometimes it's gone away from I'm just going to do some material that shocks my audience to I'm going to do material that I see. Let me see how I can get it to shock on the highest level possible. And maybe that has me trending for the next 2 days or whatever. Even if it's in a negative way, you're still trending. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it can't be too negative if you're going to get canceled, right? It's got to be right on that razor's edge so that people do, right? They're like, actually, I like it.
I'm not really part of the canceling thing though. I've just, if I don't like something, I just don't listen to it anymore. I wouldn't go to that person's show or
Yeah,
whatever. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Yeah, but
normal,
I'm
the normal situation. Now this extra dimension that hopefully is changing was
yeah.
just something that has been seen too often, and now, well, you got to talk about it, otherwise it may repeat, right? And you don't
Yeah.
want it to repeat. Who knows? All right, cultural translation of comedy. How do jokes that work in one country, area, region bomb in another?
It has to do, I think, with slang in the language and how
Okay.
things go. Some things are just funnier somewhere else than they are here. Um, and also what's big in your country at that time? What are the issues in your country? That
Hmm.
would make a difference to me on whether a joke works here or if it works somewhere else. Um, yeah, you see recording artists do that in some of their concerts where they might be from this country, America, and that certain songs are popular, but they didn't get popular in another country. So they'll switch those songs out when they're doing a live show somewhere else for something that was more popular there. And I think comedians have to kind of cater to that environment as well.
Well, you got to have a good repertoire to be able to do that, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need some range, some material. You could like, oh, Americans like this, Europeans like that, and
Right.
you don't share that material unless you can. But yeah, you need to work on that to make that happen.
But we're
So
also
would you
more
say,
global too. So people,
yeah,
we know
yeah,
more about other countries than we used to. And I think certain things can fly now where they might not have 20 years ago.
yeah, and you get more instant feedback as well. You get to see what
Yeah.
works and what
Look,
doesn't work, right?
yeah.
Would you say that the comic are more universal while the comedian is more culturally specific?
Explain to me again what you see the difference as between those two, because I'm not feeling that
It's
part of what you're
I know
talking
it's a
about.
that's why we got the podcast because they're two sides of the same coin, right? So when you're on stage, you flip that coin and we see both sides, right? But if we're going to just stop it in time and look at one, the one is the comedian who's a funny person telling any joke versus the comic who is any person telling funny jokes. So the question is, would you consider a comic as more universal while a comedian is more culturally specific?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I wish I had an answer for you.
It's kind of a tough one. Yeah, because it's really both. But I would say that the
Well, one
comic
of
is
my one of
more
my favorite one of my favorite comics is Bill Burr. So where would you
okay.
where would you put him on that?
Well, his character is identifiable. I think he does both. He flips between the two pretty well because he flows through the character into all of his jokes and it either works or it doesn't work and he
Right,
doesn't care and he doesn't
right.
care and that's the key because if he cared and he changed his material constantly he would no longer be in character and that's a lot of what we see comics doing they actually don't even go in that cycle. They don't want to have to get rid of material because it doesn't work in their character and they don't know until they know, right? And so it's a lot tougher. It's actually quite painful to do it, but that's what we all the names like Bill Burr and any name you name is because they actually do this,
Right.
and it's the most difficult because you will fail most of the time, which
Well, I
is
think it's one of as far as entertainment goes, because I started out as a professional dancer and then I moved into production. I think the comic is the hardest thing to hit the stage. You've got, even if it's 5 minutes, 5 minutes can be an eternity if you lose the audience in the first 10 seconds. And that can be a
exactly.
life.
No, no, that's it. You have 10 to 15 seconds to begin. Otherwise, you've lost them for the next 5 minutes, and you basically are torturing yourself and everyone
Yeah.
else, right? So you,
Yes.
yeah, that's 100%. That's the whole shebang right there. Is
Hmm.
the origin story. All right, so crowd work versus crafted work. We were kind of talking about this before with the woman you were mentioning. We still don't know the mystery woman, um,
Sorry,
but
whoever you
but
are.
I'm trying to, I bet ChatGPT, if we describe it, it'll probably come up with something pretty close. But so the idea of crowd work versus crafted work, right? So I would say that the comic riffs more and does more crowd work, while the comedian performs this kind of um, more developed work. So the question is, where's the sweet spot? So what happens when a comic leans too much into crowd work, and or maybe when a comedian gets heckled for, well, sticking to his character that everyone hates?
I like a sprinkling of crowd work. That's my personal opinion. Come out and do your thing. If you can kind of let that organically transition into some crowd stuff here and there. But if it starts to get too specific, sometimes you can lose the rest of the audience because they don't always hear what's going on either, you know?
When you're talking, interacting with the audience and they don't have a
Yeah.
microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Sometimes that I agree 100% is you basically need to repeat what they said for everyone else to hear. And at that point, that's generally not funny unless you take it out of context, right? So that can be super, right? That can be super difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you experienced actually heckling lately or ever? Have you really seen it?
No, nothing. I mean, nothing in person. I go to the comedy store here in LA once in a while, and I think the audiences are starting to kind of calm down a little bit. It went through a phase, I think, where it was a lot of heckling, but I think it's kind of started to calm down a little bit, and people are starting to hopefully realize once again, if you don't like this person, just roll with it in the moment and just don't ever watch them again. But you don't have to banter back and forth, and you don't have to try to make the show about you because it's not your show. You paid to come and watch. So
That's true. That's true. Do you think maybe we might be missing something that if hecklers disappear, if they become an endangered species?
I think if it can happen in a fun way if you know how to play off of it. But when it gets into just a mean,
Hmm.
and we saw that for a while, I think a few years ago, where people were just rude and mean for no reason. Once again, it's not about you. You're paying to watch a show. If you don't like it, leave.
That's right.
Or, research the comedian before you go so you know what you're getting into.
Exactly. That's basically, yeah, exactly. That's everyone's responsibility. It doesn't turn into a New York City subway in LA, right? That's what the heckler was, right? And, you go in a New York subway and you're like, this is definitely not a place I dare to do stand up, but I've seen it. Okay, next question. Very important question. Advertising
Oh,
and self promotion. Who advertises themselves more, the comic or the comedian? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon. Might be a loaded question, right?
I think they both have to. I mean, how do you get away from it? How do you not do that? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Everything is
Well,
about
that
self-promotion anyway anymore. You know what I'm saying?
exactly is it's so it, follow up with that is do you see that as selling out or is it necessary for survival?
I think right now it's necessary. for survival. I think in the entertainment business, no matter what, whether you're singer, dancer, whatever you are, choreographer, producer, doesn't matter. You have to find a way to get yourself out there, and you just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Yeah.
Understood. The most famous example of one that pulled away was Dave Chappelle, right? He got offered millions of dollars and he just disappeared, right? He went off the grid because he didn't
Yeah.
want to, what he was considered selling out, right? So we don't see it that often. And when we do, it's pretty obvious. That was for
I
more
think you
than
have to choose what
survival.
works best for your career. You know what I'm saying? It seemed to work because didn't he move back to Ohio or something like
Oh
that?
yeah, he was always from there. Maybe that's my point is that is the survival, right?
Yeah.
Is
Like
is
Keanu Reeves doesn't live in Hollywood. He lives on the East Coast. He makes a movie. He doesn't do a lot of social media. You don't see him out. He's not
right.
photographed in bars or restaurants or clubs or anything like that. All of a sudden, he's got a movie and then he's gone. But then other people never leave.
Exactly. Exactly.
So which is better?
No, I mean, there's no, I guess you know what? There's no moral compass for this one. It's just pretty much 100% everyone says you got to do it to survive. So that just
Right,
happens to be
right.
part of it.
Yeah.
All right. Timing and delivery. Is it a science or an art? So do comics rely more on structure and comedians more on rhythm and emotion?
Timing to me is definitely an art. And I just take that from the dance world and that I've
Okay.
come from. You see it in comedy. You can feel that timing energy if they say the punchline a second too soon or a second too late, and that energy breaks in the room and then it doesn't land the way it's supposed to. So I think timing is an art. I don't know if you're born with it, or in my case, I studied and took class and it gets kind of ingrained into you. I don't know as far as a comic, do you just naturally have that, or do you have to build up to that thing where you get the timing, don't talk over the audience when they're laughing their asses off so they miss the next two lines of what you said, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely so. Maybe in the context, would you consider delivery a science?
You're still talking about timing, right? No.
Timing and delivery, science or art?
I think it's art. I think it's an intern. I don't know if I'd call it science. I think it's an internal, it's a feeling. You have to feel what's happening in the room with what's going on with the people that you're performing for. And if you're losing them, how do you get them back? Like I said, are you talking over your own jokes because people are still laughing from the last one? You have to know when to take that breath and then deliver something. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw this one. If you do lose them, wouldn't it be a science to bring them back?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's a science and an art form. If you can lose them and then get them back. Like
Well,
I
if the
just
art,
watched,
if you were doing the art and you lost them with your art, maybe you
right.
should do something else to bring them back, right?
No, you're right. I just watched, and I like the guy, so I'm not saying this to dog on him, but Brett Goldstein, he just put out a special on HBO.
Okay.
He's in the Ted Lasso show and stuff like
Ah,
that. His special was pretty funny, but there's moments where you can tell he was trying to bring it back to a certain punchline several
okay.
times, and
Yeah.
usually you can build that into something really funny, but there was something about the timing that just didn't hit. So every time he brought back that one line again, it should have been got a bigger laugh, but it never did. But there was something off in the delivery, the timing of it. So I don't know if he'll ever see this. If he does, I apologize.
No, I mean it's a thing. It happens all the time. Personally, I that happens to me when it's revolving around memorization, basically. Like I'm doing it right now. I can't even remember the word memorization. That throws your timing off, right? You're like, I have to hit the word, and you're like too focused on that word that you miss the beat, right?
Right, right. Well, there's
Yeah.
comedians that don't go out with any notes, and there's comedians come out and they have notes on a stool or a piece of paper that's kind of got the outline or structure, and there's some of them that don't have that at all. There's some that come off as if they're really like Ricky Gervais really comes off like he's going off the top of his head a lot. I don't know if he is,
Mhm.
but he seems to be able to pivot quickly if the audience doesn't like something he said or they think it's too much. He seems to be able to pivot very fast, and get them right back into what he's doing. So
Would you put that in the category of science when he's pivoting?
Probably there's some science behind that. And I'm sure the brain is going in that second or two, going, okay, you have a
Yeah.
split second to turn this ship around before
Right,
it goes off.
because he's doing it because it's not working, whatever he's doing. Right.
Right. Or he said something that people, you get that oh from the audience because he said something that comes off as so offensive. But then you got to
Is
be able to flip that around real quick so you don't, turn them off completely.
Now, isn't that his style though? Is he throws that out at you just to get that reaction? Doesn't he do
I
that?
think so.
Does
I do think that's part of his style, but I also think that once he does that, you have to, whether it's science or art at this point, you've got to be able to pivot instantly. You can't keep putting them off and putting them off and putting them
right,
off. You got to be able to
right,
bring them back again. Because we can
right.
all go out and say offensive things. That's easy to do. But can you make it funny and can you turn it around if it's not working? You know?
I could see that as a way to instantly read the room and everyone
Yeah.
else knows it. You know, where I don't know if you've ever experienced it, maybe not necessarily on stage or you've seen it in a large group where there's actually different storylines occurring between everybody, right? There's like different conversations, but it's all in their head. And
Right.
maybe if you're obviously on stage, you're trying to focus everyone, they're actually in different mental spaces. And this may be the way to find out what's the average, right? What is the average mental space by their reaction? So I'm thinking
Right.
maybe that's what he's doing. I don't know. Something to
Okay.
throw out there. How about laughter versus applause? Are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks that validate the message?
I would rather laugh than be applauding. And sometimes I think when they're going for the applause, that feels a little more set up. Like I'm thinking if I say it this way, that I'm going to get that applause moment. Or they say something and then they purposely stop because they're waiting for the applause thing to start. That might not
So
have
would you?
answered your question at
No,
all.
100. Yeah, I mean, these questions. So you may not know, but when I started the podcast, I was like, okay, I need some good questions. I threw it into Chat GPT, and these are pretty much what came out,
Oh, wow.
and they're pretty good. I think they're pretty
Yeah, no,
good.
they really are. Yeah.
I've been sticking with them since the first podcast. So I'm trying to, obviously develop them, but they're still, pretty good. So I'm thinking this was a win on this one. But to add to that, right? Um, oh yes, I was going to say, um, do you think that applause are technically funny? Like you're applauding because you know the joke is technically funny?
I do, and sometimes I've seen comedians, they do a string of, maybe it's on a certain topic. So there's a string of things being said, people are laughing, 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 and then they finally throw in that last cherry on top, and that's when people lose it, and that leads into the applause. I've had that experience watching comedians before.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's to me that's there's a particular joke format called list of three, which that happens because you can go more than three. But if you
Right.
got two normal things and the third thing's a surprise, they laugh. You have the fourth is the tag, fifth, sixth, and it keeps going. I could see you run out of laughter, and now you just got
Yeah.
to applaud, right? You're
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
exhausted. You've laughed yourself into the point where you're like,
Yeah,
I need
because
to
they've
breathe.
built it to a place that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To me, that's my go-to because you can write more. So I should probably do more examples of those. All right. So comedy, right? That's what I should be doing. So comedy as commentary. When does a comedian cross into becoming a philosopher or a preacher?
Trying to think of a comedian that does that I like.
So which is one that does it that you don't like? I mean, that's just as valid.
No, I know. I'm trying to think of either one of those situations. I think I don't like anything that becomes too preachy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, unless that's their intent, right? I know one in
Right.
particular. I'm pretty sure that's their intent at this point, but it wasn't when they first were. Well, maybe it was, but they didn't do it at the beginning of their career, but they're doing it more now.
I like when people work in personal stories and you can tell
Right.
what they're talking about, even if it's a little dark, it's definitely authentic to who they are and what they've already experienced. And
Which,
maybe within that, they are able to tell a life lesson or something that they took away from it, but it still works. And there's still something funny in there somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the point is to make it good and not dilute the humor, right?
Right.
All right. Second to last question. Comedy and vulnerability. I can't say this word. This is the second time. Vulnerability. I can't say the word. Do comics hide behind their jokes and comedians expose themselves? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Now,
And
which one
making
is
yourself
braver?
making yourself vulnerable is way braver to put it out there to, especially once again, we live in a world where, you can kind of look up anything about anybody. So if
Mhm.
they can take any tragedy in their life and put it out there and be vulnerable about it, I think that's cool. I got to see in the mid 2000s, I got to see Joan Rivers.
Okay.
Um, and at the end of her set, she tells the story of her husband committing suicide. And actually, 90 minutes of laughter, laughter, people are losing their shit. And she gets the entire room to come down to where you could hear a pin drop. She's so delicately telling the story. And then she ends the set by talking about how after the funeral, she takes her daughter, her teenage daughter, to a restaurant. They sit down, they look at the menus, and she looks up to her daughter and says, if your father could see these prices, he'd kill himself all over again. And the entire
Oh,
room goes from this hush to out of control once again, leading into the applause and walks off. But she told the
yeah.
most vulnerable, and there's people in the audience that have had this experience with a family member, a friend, or something. But to take it down to this little, like I said, just a hush, nothing in the room except her voice. And then she walks off to thunderous laughter and applause. I think that's brilliant. Plus, it's vulnerable. You know what I mean?
I think your description of this joke, is epic. Like, it's such a good joke that you describing the joke, which normally is the worst thing anyone can do, is actually
Yeah.
doing it so much justice, right? I've never heard the description of a joke. Actually, I felt the joke by you
Oh,
describing the
cool.
joke,
Oh,
which
cool.
is, which is, now, I don't know who to give the credit to more, you or Joan Rivers. Is it the joke or is it the explanation of the joke? But the translation is there, which is really kind of epic. Now, I'm going to throw a curveball at you with this one.
Oh, shit.
This is this is adding questions to the ChatGPT questions. Something that it may say, this is something I don't want to answer. So I'll ask you. Would you consider would you consider playing the victim a brave action?
No, I don't think that's authentic.
What if it is? What if, I mean, yeah, you don't think it's authentic. That's an interesting way of,
If you're telling a personal story where you were the victim, that's different than playing, which says to me pretending to be the victim of something that you weren't really the victim of. You know what I
well, that
mean?
100%. That's why I'm asking. That's why it's a touchy question. Well, what if this is your way to connect with the audience and you're all sharing being a victim?
Well, I think it would depend on the comedian and how they deliver it. I think, you touched on it early on. Does it feel authentic? People really aren't stupid and they can feel when
Right.
you're just kind of trying to drag them along, but you're not really sincere and you're not really authentic. So if it's done
100%.
and it's the delivery about it. You know what I mean?
I'm only throwing, I mean, I'm working on a project where one of my main characters, people are going to be translating. They're going to be switching off being victim and not being victim. We'll talk about it later. It's an interesting project, but uh, yeah, that's where it's kind of coming from. I
I
don't know
just
if
want
you've
to hear
ever
you say
seen that.
vulnerability again.
I can't. I won't. I need to be able to. If I read, maybe it's, where is it? Where is it? Vulnerable. I don't know. I don't know why I can't say it. I think we have to write a joke around that.
So going forward, you should just hold up a sign when you get to that word with the word written on
I got to write a joke for that. Why I can't say it. I don't know why I can't say it, but I'm going to find out.
it.
All right. Last question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comic's tight five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Say it one more time.
So the idea here is that the comic, the one that just tells jokes,
Right.
can really structure it out, tell a tight 5 minute interval. But the comedian has more of that, point of view. So later, when you forget about everything else, which one will you remember?
I would probably remember the one that can tie in more culturally, because I feel like then you're really plugged into the present moment of what's happening because you're feeling it's kind of you're kind of plugged into the zeitgeist and what's going on. And if you can throughout your career keep growing in that way, so you're
Yeah.
always plugged in to what's happening, I think that makes you more memorable. I mean, that makes
Yeah.
me think of like George Carlin when you bring up that question. I think he was culturally, he was in it, he was in the moment. And you can go back and listen to his stuff and you can see that he was really plugged in. At least according to me, that's how it felt, you know.
Are you going back and reliving it as nostalgia, or are you taking it fresh and anew when you see old material of his?
Some of his, I
Yeah.
think it
Or
comes off
anyone.
as fresh. Well, him specifically, to me, it comes off as fresh because it's still relevant. A lot of what he talked about, especially with politics, it's so relevant now that you're like, oh, he said this 12 years ago. He said this 15 years ago. And we're kind of living through a lot of it right now. So it's to me, it comes off very fresh and relevant.
So he's predicting the future. That's really right. That's where his material's coming from, is the
Hey,
future.
what? Yeah. I think
Huh.
he smoked a lot of weed, so maybe that helped. I don't
Does that work?
know.
Is that how you can time travel? Is it getting high? I don't know if that works.
At least mentally, yeah.
Yeah. Very awesome. Well, Gary, is there anywhere you like everyone to find you online?
Yeah, go to Instagram and follow Gary Thomas Entertainment. You can also, also on Facebook under Gary Thomas Entertainment, TikTok, Gary Thomas Entertainment, LinkedIn. We got connected on LinkedIn. But anything Gary Thomas Entertainment, but specifically Instagram is where I post. I have a brand new rock cabaret rock show called Whiskey, which by the way, I add a comedian to that show every time I do it.
Very
It's a
cool.
dance cabaret rock show, but in between, there's 3 rounds to the show. And in between the rounds, I always bring in a different comedian just to kind of break
Very
up the
cool.
evening and add a little bit of funny. Yeah.
Where is that?
I was doing it at a place called Hotel Ziggy on Sunset last year. And now I'm going to be moving it to a place called Beaches Tropicana in West Hollywood, probably end of June, early July.
Very cool. And how long do you stay in that location?
I want to start out there. I want to see if I can make that place my residency. So I think we're going to start out once a month, then go to twice a month, but I want it to be once a week with a line around the block kind of thing.
Right.
Because I can change up my material all the time, and then in every show I bring in a different comedian, so it's never the same comedian. So,
Very cool. Well, I'm sure you know a lot of comedians that hopefully would want to participate in this podcast. So hopefully there's something there.
oh, I'll send you some names. Seriously, I'll send you some names, and then you can with some emails, and then you can talk to them and say Gary Thomas told me, to reach out to
Absolutely.
you.
Well, I'm going after this. We're going to talk a little bit more about Robot Tarot, which might be something they would be interested in as well, you and everyone else that's watching. So they should check out Robot Tarot.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe so you can be updated, notified on the next episode of Comedians and Elevators podcast.
Cool. Bye.